What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Members of the Rob Corps. Man, I am so sad that Secret Empire is coming to an end. I've loved this story so far. It's so cool. I mean, I've been reading comics since like 1994, 1995, something like that, maybe a little bit earlier. So it's all just kind of a give and take. I mean, everybody who was reading this knew that like the original Captain America was going to come back. But it's kind of a cool thing with this whole Secret Empire story because this is, to me, one of the greatest stories involving Captain America, an evil Captain America. It's always something that I thought was interesting because it's something that we've never really seen before. When it came to Captain America's character, on the whole, he was usually always the good guy. He was like Superman, right? Like, with the exception of Injustice, you never really saw an evil Superman. With Captain America, it's much the same way. He was always the good guy. His personality was switched from time to time, but that was about it. It was always like a one-off or something along those lines, or someone impersonating Captain America. So that's why this is so cool. But in the last video, we had talked about how the fall of Hydra was basically beginning, about how there were a litany of things that were all taking place all at the same time. The character Quasar, who had previously been incapacitated at the start of Secret Empire, had been left unconscious the entire time. We had talked about how in Fantastic Four, Volume 1, issue number 522, Quasar was able to go toe-to-toe with Galactus. And so because of that, Nick Spencer, drawing on all that storytelling from Marvel, basically established Quasar as the one character who could take down the Shield, this massive force field that had surrounded Earth and kept some of the most powerful superheroes outside Earth and forced them to basically fight against this horde of Chitauri army, over and over and over again. But the idea was that with Quasar effectively channeling this brief glimpse of the power of Galactus through the quantum bands, it resulted in the Shield being taken down. This resulted in the various superheroes who were stranded outside Earth, Carol Danvers, Hyperion. These characters just came flowing back in, and they were able to help turn the tide of battle. Now, the other thing we had talked about is something called the Vanishing Point. And the Vanishing Point was very much this obscure thing that we didn't really know anything about. All we knew is that there was a guy who was running around there saying that he was Steve Rogers. And by all standards of measurement, he was the classic Steve Rogers, which is to say the version of Captain America that we saw before the events of Secret Empire, before he was turned into a Hydra agent during Avengers Standoff. During this time, we also ended up finding out that Kobik, this sentient cosmic cube, was present as well. And so what this does is answer that question. So for those of you guys who feel a little confused about what's taking place with this whole Vanishing Point thing, this will answer all of that. Essentially, with Steve Rogers following Kobik down this, rabbit hole, so to speak, effectively what this is a huge explanation on what the Vanishing Point is itself. In truth, the Vanishing Point is just a place created by the cosmic cube Kobik and simply houses memories. That's all it is. This version of Steve Rogers is a memory of who Captain America used to be, as opposed to who he is now. And that makes sense because remember, Kobik's a little kid, and like every little kid, Kobik sees the world through idealized eyes, which is to say, here's how I would like the world to be, not the way the world is. But the idea here is that with Kobik as a character, when she looked to Captain America, and when the Red Skull had basically asked her to change the history of Captain America and to make him into a Hydra agent, she did so through the eyes of a child, believing that she was genuinely making the world a better place. The problem with this is that when her essence was quote unquote fragmented and scattered throughout the world, her mind remained. And watching the events unfold, watching the whole of Secret Empire take place, she had basically come to the realization that she believed she made a mistake. But with regards to the remainder of the Earth's superheroes, remember, under the rallying point of Sam Wilson, who had returned to his mantle as Captain America following the events of Secret Empire, basically the time where he quit, this gave the superheroes a rallying point. Because of this, it coincides with the capture of T'Challa. Now keep in mind, with Black Panther ruling over Wakanda, historically speaking in Marvel Comics, Wakanda's always been isolated, and this has been just as much a position of Black Panther in order to maintain his resources as it is the traditional role of the Black Panther lineage. Remember, when it comes to the origin of the whole Black Panther clan, the idea was that this giant meteor containing vibranium just crash landed in Wakanda. The result is that Bashinga, who I believe was the original Black Panther, basically prayed to the Panther god Bast in order to protect the mound. The Panther god Bast gave them the abilities to do it. In turn, Wakanda was built around what's known as the Great Mound, or this giant store of vibranium, and every single Black Panther that's ever existed has served the purpose of making sure that the Great Mound is always protected. With T'Challa and with T'Challa's father, they looked at it as a measure of resources. If vibranium is one of the most important metals in existence, people will pay a massive amount of money for it. And so this became as much of a tool to bolster the various resources of Wakanda, making it the most technologically advanced country in the world. This is how all that worked. But because of all that, Black Panther has routinely been isolated. And so during the events of Secret Empire, when the Cosmic Cube fragmented and just split all across the world, Black Panther gained one of the shards. But instead of just immediately running to Captain America and saying, haha, look what I have, you'll never get it. Instead, he just stayed in Wakanda. And Captain America sent force after force after force to try to capture the Cosmic Cube shard from Black Panther himself, and none of it was ever successful. The result is that ultimately it took Baron Zemo, Captain America's second in command, with an army far larger than the Wakandans could possibly withstand, to finally invade the territory, take the Cosmic Cube fragment, and bring Black Panther in as a prisoner. And so that's where all this basically begins to come into play. Now, the other half of this are the mutants, and that's why a lot of these tie-ins were really kind of important. When it came to Secret Empire, the mutants were by and large just out there by themselves. They were in a realm called Nutian, and there was basically a treaty of sorts that was struck between Hydra and the X-Men themselves. Now, the funny thing about this is that this actually ties into the Captain America tie-in for Secret Empire itself, and it's actually a cool scenario because what it does is it deals with the character of Sally Floyd. Now, of course, Sally Floyd is most notable as being really finding her claim to fame in the Civil War frontline stories, but she was basically a reporter that at the end of it all sat down and asked Captain America, you were talking about fighting on behalf of freedom and you willingly sacrificed other superheroes' lives, and once it was all said and done, we're right back where we were before, so what progress did you really make? And so because of all that, because those hard-hitting, hard-line questions were being asked, ultimately Sally Floyd kind of gained a reputation as being a person that asks the wrong kind of questions to the wrong kinds of people. Now, as a journalist, that's fine because her goal was to uncover the absolute truth, but in the Captain America tie-in, she was told, do not ask about the destruction of Las Vegas. She instead chose to do that, and of course, as I've always said, you have the right to say anything you want to, and you also have the right to deal with the consequences of it. The result is that Sally Floyd was thrown in prison. Now, during this whole questioning process, she had basically asked about the X-Men, about the idea that the X-Men are receiving preferential treatment. Now, the official answer of Captain America as head of Hydra was that, well, no, the X-Men are kind of out there. We view them just like anybody else. They exist within the continental United States, and so they are under Hydra's rule. The truth was that he had struck a back alley deal with Magneto, basically saying, hey, look, you stay away, I stay away, and we're all going to be fine. Now, this makes perfect sense just because it's the X-Men. They're some of the most powerful beings in existence. Emma Frost, by herself, could probably take out Captain America and all of his Hydra forces. All these members of the X-Men could easily band together and take on Captain America, to say nothing of Magneto. And that's the importance of all this. While all these superheroes are out fighting, while Spider-Man had successfully dealt with the new superior Spider-Man with the return of Dr. Octopus, this ultimately reveals the idea that Captain America, in his treaty with Magneto, had basically expected the X-Men to hand over the shard of the Cosmic Cube if they ever came into possession of it. The fact that they didn't put Captain America in a situation where he basically said, you are now an enemy of Hydra. Now, the funny thing about this is that he says, hey, look, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones if you give me the shard of the Cosmic Cube. The result is that the X-Men were biding their time. They were just waiting for the chance to strike. And that's the importance of all this, is because the X-Men have always been viewed as outliers. The result is that when the X-Men have the opportunity to basically fight alongside all these other superheroes and essentially say, hey, look, we're not as much of an outlier as you think we are, they jump on that opportunity. The result is that while Emma Frost was basically dealing with this whole thing with Captain America, she served as a distraction. The reason why is because Captain America is floating around in a giant ship, and that giant ship is made of metal, and Magneto controls metal, and with the force of God, he brings the whole thing crashing down. Also, keep in mind here, we have Odin's son. With the Jason Aaron run of Thor, Odin's son was unable to wield his hammer because he didn't believe that he was worthy of wielding his hammer. Case in point, a lot of people talk about the struggles, the trials and tribulations that Odin's son went through to be able to lift his hammer. He went through all these things, these, hundreds if not thousands of years of, trials and tests and so on and so forth. In a 12-issue limited story that was published in 2006, 2007, it was after the events of Thor Ragnarok, that detailed the origin story of how Thor was basically able to wield his hammer in the first place. Remember, how it was that Thor became worthy was never explored in Marvel Comics. All we knew is that he had been sent to Earth and forced into the body of Donald Blake in order to experience humbleness so he would wield his hammer as a hero, as opposed to this bloodlusted warrior who just wanted to get in fights all the time, like a child, effectively. The result was that he gained some measure of humbleness, he went back to wielding his hammer again, and that was it. That was his origin story, and it happened happen in one comic. In the 12-issue limited series, that revealed that he originally became worthy because Odin sent Loki and Sif and Odin's son on a mission to fight a dragon. They succeeded and he picked up his hammer. Now, of course, with this in mind, because Odin's son's loyalty is to the side of good, at the end, he abandons the whole idea that he doesn't believe he's worthy to wield his hammer and instead literally turns against all the forces of Hydra. The result of this is that he helps to turn the tide. Now, at the same time, we get a little bit of humor in this story. With the champions, remember, they're teenagers. That's really all they are. And at the end of the day, they were basically being held prisoner by Taskmaster and Black Ant. Now, these guys were never really important. They were basically the comedic relief for the entire Secret Empire event, which was kind of interesting. But the idea is that with the tide being turned, with Thor, you know, they make this comment about, oh man, did you hear that boom? It's like, yep, that's the we're gonna lose boom. And so of course they turn code on Hydra and they basically tell the champions, hey, look guys, when the Avengers come, make sure they know that we let you watch TV and that we got you milkshakes after you cleaned your bunks. Now, when I was reading that, I couldn't help but think that like Taskmaster and Black Ant were like, hey, look guys, you gotta clean your bunks. I'll tell you what, if you clean them, we'll take you to Shake Shack or we'll get you stuff from there. And the champions are like, yeah, man, I really hope that's how the whole event played out. But regardless, of course, the champions are basically released by Taskmaster and Black Ant, which bolsters the existing ranks of the superheroes fighting against Hydra. And that's basically what this is. That's why in so many ways and so many times I've said, this is what Civil War II should have been. There's motivation, there's drive, there's logic and reason behind why it is the superhero community is fighting one another. In Civil War II, it was just, well, this Inhuman says you can see the future, so we're just going to take it as an absolute truth. Why? Well, because a movie's coming out soon and we got to have a story called Civil War. The idea with Secret Empire is they're fighting against what they believe to be an oppressive regime. The idea that Hydra Captain America says he's going to change the world, when in reality, they see that he's making it worse. Now, the question has to be asked here, how many lives are being lost in this battle? How many buildings are being destroyed? How many people are losing their homes, losing their belongings, all their personal things? Do the ends justify the means? The idea is that, again, this is really more of just setting the stage for this final battle in the sense that Doctor Strange basically brings back Jane Foster Thor, because remember, in the free comic book day issue of Secret Empire, one of the things that Chthon, who was possessing the body of Scarlet Witch, did was banish Jane Foster Thor to another dimension. Another thing that goes on here is the idea that when it comes to Sharon Carter, she's continually being brainwashed by Dr. Faustus. That's why these little tidbits, that's why these little things are so cool. Remember, when it came to Sharon Carter, she was a long-time love interest of Captain America, but when he revealed himself to be a Hydra agent, she basically ran off. She was like, okay, look, you are not the person that I love, don't want to have anything to do with you. But it's not like Nick Spencer sat down and said, you know what would be cool is if a guy named Dr. Faustus, who is really good at brainwashing people, brainwashed Sharon Carter just for the sake of the story. This all goes back to Civil War. During that whole thing that dealt with that original Civil War story, the whole thing that dealt with the first death of Captain America, Sharon Carter was the one who pulled the trigger. What we ended up learning was that the Red Skull had wanted to simply eliminate Captain America, and the whole Civil War event allowed for him to operate under the current because all the superheroes were distracted with their own inner conflicts. The result is that he basically grabbed Dr. Faustus and then brainwashed Sharon Carter, but we didn't know that. All we knew is that when Civil War was over, Captain America was being taken for his trial. He was shot in the shoulder by Crossbones, and everybody believed that the Crossbones had fired a couple more shots and had ultimately killed Captain America. In truth, Dr. Faustus had brainwashed Sharon Carter so that when Crossbones shot Captain America, it was a distraction. Everybody started looking away, they started running, they started panicking, and in the panic and the turmoil, Sharon Carter fired a couple shots into the stomach of Captain America and was the one that actually killed him. Now, of course, in response to this, and the reason why this is important is because following this event and Sharon Carter learning that she'd been brainwashed and she was the one that shot Cap, she began to basically listen to the voice of Dr. Faustus over and over and over again and build up a tolerance to his brainwashing techniques. The result is that while he's trying to force her to basically hail Hydra, she plays along, biding her time, waiting until the point where the superheroes strike. She grabs that as the opportunity to take out Dr. Faustus and begin operating on her side of the spectrum, trying to help bring down Hydra. And so what ends up happening here is that with this cosmic cube being incomplete, which is to say one of the shards is still missing, what ends up happening is Captain America dons a suit of armor. And with the superheroes facing off against the forces of Hydra, with them effectively winning, all hope seems to be completely lost when Hydra Captain America emerges from the Capitol building with a suit of armor powered by the cosmic cube, meaning he has all the powers of the cube itself. He's basically God. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Next week, we will cover the conclusion of Secret Empire, how it all ends, what all happens, how it all comes crumbling down. But yeah, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.